By definition, an engaged institution does not treat public engagement as an add-on activity or a fringe activity. It embeds public engagement into the way it approaches its work. But how is it done on a day-to-day basis? How do you design bespoke activities that we will hear from our extraordinary lineup of speakers in this segment? Just for the reference of the audience, we will first have all the 4 talks of 10 to 15 minutes each, and then take questions together at the end of all these talks. So please keep on sharing your questions with us in the chat box. Inviting first Professor Rajesh Gopakumar, Director of International Center for Theoretical Sciences, Bangalore. Professor Gopakumar has been creating at ICTS a vibrant center for research in the theoretical sciences through in-house research faculty, as well as through intense collaborative workshop programs and pedagogical schools for researchers. All this he has done while continuing his own research in the string theory. I welcome you, Professor Gopakumar. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Banya, and thank you for having me as part of this session in this very nice SciComm Huddle that you've put together. May I share the screen? I had a small presentation.
Sure, yes.
I think maybe you may need to give me the... okay, let me see. I think, yeah, I can do that.
Yes.
Yes, the question of how institutions can engage in very actively in outreach and science communication and so on is something that that's very close to our heart, and I'll try to tell you in the form of a few snapshots of postcards, if you wish, our laypersons. To laypersons and creating awareness of science, enthusing young people, attracting them to science as a career, and so on. This, of course, is something we are all familiar with. It's somewhat unidirectional in some ways, and but we can try to address that, and I'll say a little more about that. The second aspect is what I would call science pedagogy, which is how scientific institutions can actually engage with educationists, namely school, college teachers, and others, on effective ways to teach scientific concepts in schools, colleges, and thereby develop both scientific talent as well as broadly scientific temper. And this, I think, is a much more bidirectional engagement because it involves the scientists and the educationists, and I think there's a lot to learn on both sides. Finally, I think the sort of there's what I would call science advocacy, which is engaging with the broader social structures, and just to put some names like government or industry or civil society, that's like NGOs and citizen organizations and so on, in shaping policy and interventions at the macroscopic level. And this could be in a variety of topics which would do with informed scientific input like climate, pollution, and there's plenty of that. And this would, by necessity, have to be something highly collaborative between the scientific bodies as well as the scientific institutions and the society, the other structures and institutions involved. So this is how I'll try to sort of carve up my presentation as well. But before that, I want to say something which was alluded to also by Banya about how institutions, how in ICTS, how do we sort of how do we make sure that outreach and this engagement is an integral part and not just an add-on? And this is because our mandate, our institutional mandate as a center of the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, is to have this intertwining between what Banya mentioned, the fundamental science that we do, that our researchers do, the collaborative workshops and pedagogical schools that we organize for researchers, and the societal outreach. And these are intertwined in the sense that we draw on our own scientists as well as those, the national and international visitors, of whom we get almost an equal number. I mean, at any given time in our campus, there are, in pre-pandemic times, there were almost as many visitors as there are regular members. So we draw all of this large pool into our outreach activities, and this is how we have been able to sort of run a number of different activities. And in some sense, we incentivize our own scientists to seed many activities and, of course, to participate in them. So this is sort of how we try to facilitate a deeper engagement. So coming back to the three verticals I mentioned, so communication, and I'll offer these instances not so much as a catalog of what ICTS is doing, but more in the spirit of trying to give illustrations of the different axes along which engagement can happen, the different elements that can be introduced, and each of our activities has some slightly different elements, and I think all these elements are important. So which is why I will not be talking about our regular public lectures that we have, which is what most scientific institutions also have by way of science communication. But I would rather talk about some of the other ones that which have these additional ingredients, which I'll draw attention to as we go along. So a Copy with Curiosity is, in a sense, one of our flagship events, and right now it's what we call Curiosity During Quarantine. It's a monthly lecture series. It's held at the planetarium. So that's a point I would like to stress, that we partner very actively with the Nehru Planetarium in the city, which has vigorous science activity in addition to its planetarium activities. So, and that's actually the venue for our talks. And there's a large stream of people, of course, coming through the planetarium. And for the Copy with Curiosity, when we were holding it in person, we had a very loyal following of people who would come every month for these. One of the other novel features, I think, in this is the sort of the long question and answer session, which often goes on for half an hour, 45 minutes after the lecture of about an hour, and continues over copy or coffee, and that's our logo. So I think that's something that really gets people, that sort of tries to mitigate this unidirectionality which is normally there in any science communication. And the other thing that we have, of course, we do for all our lectures is to archive them, and that so that it's there as a permanent repository. We have a YouTube channel, which by now has maybe about nearly 50,000 subscribers, and it's a permanent resource for free dissemination, for actively trying to get people to watch some of these excellent videos. And these were, and all the Copy with Curiosity was being live streamed even when we were holding it in person. And we hope to go back to that hopefully in 2022 soon. Vigyan Adda is something we started actually during this series here, and that's sort of the logo for the Vigyan Adda. This is purely online, and we plan to keep it online, and it's aimed at a slightly different demographic of science undergraduates. And the idea is to give a little more in-depth talks on some frontier research areas in science, and encourage, therefore, some of the undergraduates to go into research in many of these areas. And so these are, again, something that we've just had in the last year or so, and we've been very we've gotten a very enthusiastic response. Of course, in all these communication efforts, we are very cognizant of diversity, and we would like to convey a variety of role models and diversity in the scientific topics, as well, as you might see from some of the titles over here. Another set of lectures, what we call the Einstein lectures, is one involving a partnership with colleges around the country, but has been in effect a lot in Karnataka, but where we have colleges try to work with colleges and have an arrangement whereby some scientists can actually go and visit them and spend time there. Scientists who are visiting ICTS or from ICTS go and spend some time there and interact with students, give us a lecture, and we cover the expenses. We expect the college to cover the local hospitality, but we support the expenses. So this is another way we hope to, which of course has been now dormant in the pandemic times, but we hope to have a deeper engagement with colleges and where especially in smaller areas, smaller towns. To sort of again go a little bit from communication to a little more interactive nature of engagement. To give some examples, we had a virtual exhibition called Cosmic Zoom, and by the way, if these slides are going to be put up, I've hyperlinked them and people can go and check them out. It's a virtual exhibition which we had again in the last year, which was meant to, and it is still available there, and it's there to sort of get people to take a tour from the smallest to the largest length scales in the cosmos, and it goes like, this is the human scale, this is that of the whale, the planet and stars, and the other way around, you go smaller to smaller microbes and so on and so forth, going all the way from 10 to the 26 meters at the universal scale to subatomic particles at 10 to the minus 18 meters. And this is interactive. You go at each scale, you click on it, and you can go deeper, and there are videos of talks. We had a number of talks as part of this, and you can sort of explore different aspects of some of the chosen themes at different scales, so that, and you see science in all its unity in certain sense, it's sort of the same scientific method that's brought to bear across the staggering scales. So this Cosmic Zoom actually evolved from the plans which still exist to have something called a BASH, a Bangalore Science Hub, as we wanted to call it, which would involve a partnership of all the scientific institutions. So ICTS, together with the Science Gallery in Bangalore, a new and very exciting venture. I think you have Madhusri Kamak speaking later tomorrow, maybe. So this, the Science Gallery and ICTS were taking the initiative to sort of bring together all the scientific institutions to have a very Habba. A Habba is a mela. And we wanted it to be a very interactive and very much more participatory science experience. And the Cosmic Zoom was one of the 5 themes. The scales was one of the 5 themes of this meeting, which we have planned in a fair amount of detail. The plans have been upended by the pandemic, but I think there's always hope that we will be able to get back to this. But this is moving more in the direction of a participatory engagement with the general public. Coming to the second vertical of pedagogy and education. So one of the things we thought, given our location, which is sort of in the sort of rural part of Bangalore and the outskirts of Bangalore, we begun an engagement with about 20 odd schools in the neighborhood, which government schools, and where we hope to engage with the teachers and for effective pedagogy and through science kits and demonstrations. So this is a picture, the top is a picture of some of our members going and sort of showing little things that illustrate scientific concepts in a very immediate way. And we hope this engagement will deepen, and we can make a difference in the way in scientific concepts are taught, how science is perceived and understood, etc. Something we are very excited about is something we've just launched, in a sense, in the last few months. Well, I mean, there was a prototype which we had before the pandemic, and these are pictures of that. This is the idea of a math circle, which some of you might be aware. It's a very, this is a concept that was there in Eastern Europe and Russia. Russia moved to the US. This idea was transplanted to the US, where it has really taken a root. And there are about 300 math circles which engage with students to sort of in multiple ways. I mean, there are multiple things about the idea is not to have lectures, but for students to explore mathematics through challenging problems, which are not what not in your conventional textbooks, but things which require creativity, require sort of often different putting different concepts together in your mind, etc. And it's proved to be very successful. So it's a very tested model by which I think the mathematics can sort of be taken out of the mathematical levels in India can be sort of, I think, taken to a different level if we seed these circles. And we are, this is actually a pan-TIFR effort. The Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education is part of the TIFR system, and together with them and ICTS and the TIFR Mumbai and so on, and partnering with some other institutions like ICERS, we plan to try to bring to seed these math circles around the country. This is still an ambitious plan, but we've sort of we've started circles in Bangalore and Mumbai, and we hope to have Pune and Delhi soon, and then take it from there. So finally, let me come to advocacy and policy. In some ways, it's the final frontier in a way in scientific engagement. And I think here ICTS is still, we still have only sort of dipped our toes in this. But I think this is something more a broader question. We should ask how our institutions, and even more generally, actually, the science academies and other scientific bodies can actually engage and intervene in public policy so that there is sound scientific input. And there are any number of topics. I mentioned some earlier, some here, any number of topics where this is very important. And of course, during recent pandemic times, many Indian scientists have engaged quite a bit, both from the point of view of the biological sciences and the vaccine creation, as well as other aspects of but also from the mathematical and theoretical sciences in terms of the data, analyzing the data and the modeling and similar things. And there's been a sort of a good churn and healthy debate about these things within the science community. But I think we need a sustained and deep interaction, which is not just a one-off thing, not just something that happens in a crisis. And this perhaps needs a multi-institutional interface body, which will enhance the collective scientific, which will harness the collective scientific expertise we have in the country, and will get them involved with critical issues, sort of create the awareness of critical issues where they can engage meaningfully, and partner with other organizations which are also people with a stake in these issues, and who have a different, who come to it from a different angle, and therefore bring a different valuable perspective. And scientists often tend to work in a very blinkered perspective on an issue, but I think an engagement and a body which sort of increases this engagement is something very worthwhile to think about. And I think in the long term, I think I would like to see ICTS play a role in this, but this is not something yet we've gotten into, but I thought I would share the thought. And so I think that's more or less what I had here. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I think for most part of today, we had been looking at science communication from the perspective of an individual science communicator or a science engagement professional. And it's nice to now hear the perspectives of institutes and universities, how they are doing science communication and engaging with their audience to further the cause of public engagement. Next up, we have Dr. Namrata Sengupta, trained scientist, science communicator, career coach, and advocate for equity in health and STEM. She is the program manager for scientific public engagement at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Based in Broad's Office of Communication, she is currently leading two key projects: the development of a new public science museum, which will open at Broad in 2022, and an institutional COVID-19 oral history and archives initiative. She also partners with other scientists, educators, and community groups to help develop educational programs such as classroom STEM resources, tours, and public talks. Very pleased to have you with us, Namrata, today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Banya, for the introduction. Can you just tell me if you can hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. I think, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Professor Gopakumar's talk really set the stage really well for this session. So I'm glad to present right after him. And I'd like to share with you today what Broad Institute is doing for as an institute which is pretty much very well invested in science communication and public engagement with science. So hopefully these examples can share some ideas and help facilitate some conversations, discussions after this session. So with that, little bit about my background. My background in this field kind of started with public engagement with science when I lived in India. I'm originally from Calcutta, India, and I moved to Bangalore to pursue my master's in biotech. During my biotech master's program, I was also leading a lot of campus-wide environmental science outreach projects in Bangalore University. And after that, I worked full-time with a nonprofit organization called Wastewise Trust, which is an environmental nonprofit in Bangalore. And I was doing a lot of public engagement work, especially in the field of public health and water quality and waste management. In 2011, I moved to the US to pursue my PhD in environmental toxicology, and that's kind of when my identity as a bench scientist began. But I would say that in parallel, I was also spending some time volunteering in science communication activities on campus, in science societies, or even in the local community where I lived in South Carolina in the US. I decided during my PhD that after I graduate, I'm going to work full-time in science communication. So my first job out of grad school after finishing PhD was as a full-time in science communicator for a video journal, the Journal of Visualized Experiments. The audience that I communicated largely were other scientists, students, and educators. So I would say it wasn't a very, the public was the audience to some extent, but not largely. My first full-time public-facing science communication role began with the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard in 2018. At Broad, as Banya introduced, I dabble in a lot of different projects, but like I have experience writing news stories, interviewing scientists, doing blogs, working with video producers and producing engaging videos to talk about science at the Institute. I also collaborate pretty closely with scientists to help them prepare for public talks. And a lot of my role in community engagement is centered around working towards a science museum, which I'll talk very briefly in my presentation today. But to begin, to kind of give more examples about what Broad does, I did want to take a quick moment to explain our institute structure. We are a nonprofit biomedical research institution, which is about 17 years old. And we are a collaboration between Harvard University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and 6 area hospitals in the Boston area. So we were founded in 2004, and our entire mission of the Institute has been to improve human health by using genomics to advance our understanding of human disease. So Broad Institute is a community of over 6,000 members. We have physicians, biologists, chemists, software engineers, administrative staff, representatives from many other disciplines. So we have collaborators, both local, but also global in different countries. And overall, our institute is centered around advancing research in areas such as infectious disease, cancer, psychiatric disease, rare disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, among many other fields. Like we are always developing and investing in resources to, develop tools, technology to advance scientific methods, advance scientific research. The Office of Communications is where I sit at the Broad Institute. The Office of Communications is a department under the administrative wing of the Institute. Our goal is to help share stories about our Institute's science, our people, our collaborations, and overall the Institute's impact in various fields. We work very closely with journalists and also the public to provide accurate, timely information about our work, to help understand and advance the understanding of disease and the treatment of disease. The Office of Communications mainly has a set of different functions. So it is not, it's not like one way of doing science communication or public engagement, but a variety of ways and functions we adopt. So science writing, media relations, educational tours and talks, social media, graphic design, video, website, events, and internal communication are the various functions that fall under the Office of Communications. So there are different individuals with a variety of roles in the team who are either a professional who's a graphic designer, we have a video producer, we could have somebody who's dedicated entirely to running campaigns on social media. The science writing team produces a lot of content that is daily posted on our website, that is news stories, blogs, interviews with scientists. I am a part of that team, just like many others. And I also collaborate with various other functions on our team to do other activities. The one thing that I did want to say is that our website, I would say, is kind of like the front page of the Institute. A lot of organizations and followers and I would say collaborators and the general public, if they want to first engage with our Institute, the website is the place where they first get to. So it's very important that our department, the Office of Communications, kind of maintains the website on a daily basis. We talk about our science, the different people who work here. We keep it very current, updated, and there's a whole workflow associated with just maintaining the website. On the website's main navigation, I would say community and news and media are the two ways of entry into our Institute's work in science communication. So I did want to take a quick moment to reflect on who our audience is. Our audience, most of us like to define it as science curious. So these are even if it's general public, they are mostly very curious about, scientific research, scientific, advances, or mainly biomedical research. So definitely our own researchers, employees, and trainees will always be one of our audiences because they follow us on all platforms. A large part of our audience are also external collaborators, partner institutions, that is hospitals, and then other academic institutions, potential job applicants, industry, like both tech and biotech, given the kind of work we do, journalists, donors, these are kind of funding agencies. These would be individuals or organizations following us on social media as well. Students and educators, that kind of group ranges from 8th grade up until like doctoral level. So that's a broad range of the education community that follows us. Local residents, policymakers, patients and the patient advocates or patient families is always like a pretty important group for our audience. Family and friends of employees and members of the institute, and scientifically curious members of the public. I wanted to share a few examples and also like the frequency of our public communication activities. Some of the ways we do these is definitely pretty consistent. We write news stories and blog posts to talk about our research in a very much accessible language, understood by a non-expert audience. And these kind of posts get published on our website multiple times per week. Then we have another layer of social media engagement, that is Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. And these accounts are updated almost like regularly. So if there is any kind of campaign or a news story or a blog post that is getting posted, it is consistently posted across all platforms. So just basic social media best practices. We also have an external newsletter that goes out to the general public, whoever is signed in, of course. And that goes out once or twice a month. We have a pretty good multimedia team. That is, these are a group of individuals who really work very closely with the science writers to help us, communicate more effectively with accompanying like infographics, photography, and like videos. So we have a good presence on YouTube, and we also, if you see some of our stories, and you'll see the kind of like graphic design that I'm talking about. Public lectures is a part of that our Office of Communications produces this once every season. That's approximately 4 times a year. In a pre-COVID time, we used to invite people into our auditorium, and we would have this, in the building, and we would also live stream it. But in a COVID time, we are just doing it only via on a virtual platform, with hopes to return and with an in-person element as well next year. Tours, panels, invited talks, educational resources are as needed. Our scientists, our community, they get invited to a lot of like local panels, talks, locally, nationally, globally. And we kind of work with them to help them, on their messaging, where they can be matched up to go speak, which community they're speaking to. And also we get requests for, in a pre-COVID time, the Institute would host a lot of tours for public groups to come and visit a lab, and like student groups would come to like meet with scientists. So there's a lot of like activity that goes in that space, which is again currently stalled because of COVID-19. So I did want to share a couple of impact stories just to kind of highlight how some of these activities can happen in parallel with what the community needs and responding to that. So the first story that I wanted to share, the premise is the pandemic. In March of 2020, just like much of US, Boston area and our institute, like we closed down. Around that time, by closing down, I mean we went remote. We went fully remote. Our scientific activities paused for some time. But during that time, our institute quickly adapted its large-scale genomic sequencing facility into a COVID-19 diagnostics testing lab to respond to the growing needs of testing in the Massachusetts area and even beyond. Since then, Broad Institute has emerged as one of the largest testing facilities in the United States, running up to 150,000 tests per day during the peak pandemic time when there was a huge testing demand. We are still running COVID tests even now, for empowering people to go back to work. During this time, as we were responding to a public health need in the community, we were also getting a lot of inquiries from journalists, members of the public, from partner institutions, hospitals, from government agencies, and like colleges and other entities who were trying to use testing from our institute, that they wanted to see a behind the scenes video, behind the scenes photography. And this is at a time where really no one else was being allowed into the building besides the core, like working team, the people who were working in shifts to run tests all 24 hours a day. Around the same time, we were also noticing that a lot of educators were reaching out to us saying that, is there any lab that could give a lab tour? Is there something we could get on a virtual setup? So what our team did at that time is that we kind of got together and responded to this need of the community. Our video production team was allowed with a camera inside the building, and they kind of went in with whole protected gear and filmed with the scientists a walking tour of the COVID-19 testing lab. It's kind of like a short film, 15 minutes, where each of the scientists involved kind of gave like what's happening in every step along the way. And we made it in a very accessible language, chapterized on YouTube so that we explain every step and give public, like demystify what's really happening. How is an institute processing 150,000 tests per day? Around the same time, we were contacted by the Cambridge Science Festival to like showcase this video, this behind the scenes lab tour to students, youth, adults, like all around who are participating in this virtual science festival. And what we did was, but what their ask was like, is there something, an activity you can provide for the students? So we worked with a high school educator and developed like a discussion guide and also an activity to really look and work at like a COVID-19 testing dashboard data. So the impact I'd like to summarize is we of course helped through producing this video and coming up with the discussion guide. We help demystify the steps and processes involved in executing such a big scientific and public health process to the public. We showcase leadership roles of women in science. The leaders who were running that center were, like women in science. And that was a very positive example to show to students and the public, share with public and students how large scale science is done, what empowers to like automate things, to scale things up. And then how could both students and the public look at data, interpret data from a dashboard and, make interpretations and some kind of, have engaging conversations around it based on the questionnaire that we had prepared. The other impact story that I wanted to quickly share was about this blog series that we've been running for a few years now. It's called Why Science. Why Science started off as a blog series where our writers would interview, science writers would interview a scientist or a software engineer or some kind of STEM professional who's working at the Broad Institute and kind of ask them questions about their research, their work, how are they making an impact, their career stories, and offer advice for future scientists or career aspirants. One of the immediate impact that we were made aware of recently is we found out that our HR team was using this blog series as a recruitment tool during outreach to job candidates around the country. They go to campuses nationwide, like all across the US. They go to campuses to get students right out of undergrad, out of masters who are applying for jobs as research associates, associate software engineers, or computational biologists. Like these stories have really helped them kind of give students the exposure of what a career path in these fields could be like. A broader impact of this Why Science blog series, which we realized over the years, was showcasing representation in STEM, perceptions of science and scientists in the society. That really helps people get a glance into what it is being a scientist, what it is what is the other side of this person's personality, and then of course inspire the next generation of STEM career aspirants. The other story that I wanted to quickly share is I'm a part of a team that is co-leading this project called Broad Discovery Center. Our mission of this project is to create a space that would be an engaging, publicly accessible, free science center for members of the community. We are converting a 7,000 square feet lobby of our main research building into the science center. Through engaging exhibits and thoughtful storytelling, we hope that visitors will learn about biomedical research advances in a variety of disease areas: cancer, psychiatric disease, diabetes, infectious disease. And kind of it will be a way to tell them, have a place where scientists and public can kind of come together and talk about the impact of biomedicine in our lives. The audience targeted for this are youth and adults, which is mainly the audience age group that I had shared for our institute. And we are hoping to launch the first version of this in the second half of 2022. With that, I'd like to kind of just summarize the final things from our presentation. That is, the Office of Communications, just as I said, plays a central role in communicating science on behalf of our institute to the public. We are doing that by leveraging multiple channels and various levels of engagement to cater to a wide range of audiences. We communicate consistently and pretty frequently, and we partner, and we don't do this alone. We partner very closely with scientists, we partner with community members, with educators and journalists to reach, of course, our existing audience, but we are always thinking of like, what are some new audiences? Who are the audiences that are underserved, and how can we reach out to them? With that, I'd like to end my presentation and pass it on to Banya.
Thank you for painting that very comprehensive picture of how institutional SciComm or institutional engagement is done for us, Namrata, and also sharing those impact stories with us. Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions, I think, in the chat for our speakers. I request our speakers if they can respond to them in the chat itself. And also I invite the audience to share their questions, comments using the chat box. We will try to take them up at the end of the session as well. And next, I would like to invite Priyanka Dasgupta, who works at CERN, communicating the societal applications of CERN technologies. Prior to CERN, she has been dabbling in science communication in different ways: science slams, communicating climate change from trains, working on projects like Science Express and the mobile science labs with the Vikram Sarabhai Community Science Center, and also the Department of Science and Technology in India, all aimed at raising scientific awareness and public engagement with science. Some of her other SciComm stints include working with the Museum of London, University College London, Federation of European Microbiological Societies. In her own words, she's always excited to take up projects that make science more accessible. With that, over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Banya, so much. First of all, I would like to just check if I'm audible clearly.
Yes, you're clear.
Okay, thank you so much. And now moving on to the praises for all the talks that have been going on before and the discussions that I've just been listening to, and they're really eye-opening. Now I will move on to what I'm going to speak about today, which is how CERN engages with the community. Today, of course, Professor Gopakumar and Namrata's talk already set the stage, as Namrata already said for the talk before her. But it leads very well into what I am going to talk about, which is not just the idea behind the engagement that CERN has with its communities, but some sort of a bit of in-depth strategies that it uses to engage with the public. So first off, what is it based on? It's based on the overarching idea of what CERN's mission is. And that is to first provide a unique range of particular accelerators, accelerator facilities, which is to essentially say that it needs to advance its science. And the last one would be, I would just like to draw your attention to the last part of this last bullet point, which is to unite people from all over the world to push the frontiers of science and technology for the benefit of all. And I think that's where the majority of the communication, the public engagement, and most of CERN's other efforts in engaging with the public comes from. So it's technologies and say accelerators, detectors, and computing. All of it's great for research in high energy physics, but they also have translational applications in many different fields. My job at CERN is I work at the knowledge transfer department, which is to talk about how these amazing technologies can be applied in, say, medical applications, aerospace, education, entrepreneurship, and stuff like that. So I would take first I would like to set up these two aspects of CERN. That of course we have the primary objective of the institution, which is to promote the scientific advancements, to advance scientific knowledge in people, the wider scientific community, and accelerate research in general. And then there's also the aspect of making people aware about the other applications of this. And the first part, and that would be the knowledge transfer part. So CERN's knowledge transfer group now, it's a different mission, which is to engage with experts in science and technology and accelerate innovation and maximize the global positive impact of CERN. Now I let this text be here, but again, to reduce the amount of concentrative effort, the main thing here is again to accelerate innovation and maximize global positive impact of CERN on society. But all of this requires, because it's not CERN's primary mission, it's translational application. The CERN's primary mission is to accelerate research in particle physics, let's say. So this impact on society, on other application, comes from a huge dependency on communicating about it to other member states, to government bodies, to policymakers, to funders, so that these can continue making an impact on more short-term projects, let's say. And again, so this hashtag CERN impact, again, something that CERN has now been recently using in its social media stories, is this creation of, or to create this awareness of how CERN is creating impact. And in the background, you see just one example of the latest story about how CERN's accelerated technologies were being used in flash radiotherapy to reach deep-seated tumors rather quickly and more effectively. So stories like that about how CERN's technologies, a risk assessment tool, is being used for measuring risk of COVID transmission, how CERN's technological know-how is being used in the service of astronauts. Recently, the astronaut Thomas Pesquet was using this Lumina optical fiber experiment, which was tested and calibrated at CERN in the International Space Station. And then there is this other aspect of entrepreneurship student programs. Now, this is just one example of many of these student programs that CERN has, and which I will talk about in the later part of the presentation. But again, the idea is that if we don't communicate it to people, people won't know. Because again, CERN in its primary state is not like, you won't link directly, think of entrepreneurship and CERN hand in hand. If you're coming from a very technical background, you might think that, okay, there are opportunities, but what our goal is to make that link clear, not just to give the idea of association, but also give tangible links to follow through. And these are programs that allow that tangible follow through to happen. Then there is another aspect, which is funding for these applications. So what CERN tries to do is also fund projects with not just high energy physics application, but with potential applications to society. So for example, one of the projects that is funded under the CERN Technology Impact Fund right now is the compact precision laser inclinometer. And I think the idea behind that is its use in seismic measurements. So it can be used to it can be used as an early warning system for earthquakes. So it's originally developed for a technology that should be used at CERN and its tunnels and its preparations, but the same technology can be moderated, optimized, and applied for widespread impact. This is just to say then how we transition or how we kind of frame our impact as well, because the standard already exists with UN SDG Sustainable Development Goals, and it's always nice to consider those while we are trying to orient our impact. And now coming to the meat of the presentation, which is the education and public outreach. So A lot of programs, again, the CERN Entrepreneurship Student Program that I talked about earlier, but then there are other programs like Beamline for schools, and competitions for students all across the world at different levels. So it may be competitions for high school students, it may be competitions for master's level students, it may be competitions for graduates who are already starting off but want to explore technologies and have their applications, or just want to get acquainted with the framework of CERN and, say, big science. So there are a lot of opportunities for that. CERN does something which is called the School Lab, and which has physics. It's a whole dedicated wing focusing on physics education research and connecting the high school students in the area and the high school teachers, and talking about physics research by hands-on work. Now, public engagement. So how does the framework at CERN function? Of course, because CERN is such a massive organization, even if I try to give a very comprehensive picture, I will for sure be missing out some or the other part of CERN's efforts, but I will try to give as comprehensive as a picture, which starts at the top, which is the education, communication, and outreach team. Now, this comprises all the different teams functioning, all the different communication teams, the outreach teams, and more functioning all across CERN. So CERN has other certain experiments like the Atlas experiment, CMS, and then other departments like the knowledge transfer departments and many more. So all of these then have communication teams of their own. And they manage, they sort of bid for their content. And then in the central meeting, which has a broad overview of all things CERN, using the CERN channels, they are then able to section and promote the content that goes out. And this can be technical content, this can be societal content, this can be educational content. And what does that depend on? That depends on our audience. So CERN has a very dedicated, a very thorough communication strategy based on its missions, its objectives, and the last one was 2017 to 2020. So this year it is revamping, and a new communication strategy will be put in place for broader engagement with the public. So in that, in no particular order, we have the general public, media and influencers, the local community, which is sort of a broad range awareness engagement. Then we have the international particle physics community, broader scientific community, and the teachers and students. So obviously you see the format here becomes a bit more streamlined. Then we have the government and policy makers in potential or new member states and associate member states, or the government and policy makers in member states already. Now, these are important because, of course, as I talked about the previous thing, that it's CERN has a huge societal responsibility, let's say, and it takes that very seriously, and it's core to its mission that we want to give back. And to be able to give back, and not just, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes money, and that's something you cannot pass by. And it also is a way to represent the truly international community that CERN has, which is to highlight its member states, the involvement of its member states, not just by their involvement in the projects that they're doing, but also in their stories that they communicate to the public. And then you obviously have a specific CERN audience that you're speaking to. CERN has a huge turnover rate of people coming and going through as well, of students, of fellows, of long-term staff. Long-term staff stay on for a longer duration, but that is a very select group. But there is a huge inflow and a subsequent outflow of people coming in and going out, which means that there are a lot of people who are having the opportunity to get familiar with CERN's framework of working. They're getting the opportunity to be trained, and they're also going out into the world as people coming from the expertise that they have gained from working at CERN. So there is a huge CERN community which involves CERN alumni at the outflow end of it, and then at the inflow end of it, there are the potential candidates, the students, graduates, and professionals that we want to invite to CERN to open up new opportunities to them. And of course, our conversations, our stories that we communicate differ according to the audience. Now, the first group that I talked about, the overview group, the education, communication, and outreach group, it is because CERN, being CERN and a huge organization, it has divided up its work into six main sections. So which is the media and digital communications, the editorial content production, community engagement, exhibitions, teachers and student programs, and visitor and event operations. And of course, the names are quite elusive to what the people inside these groups will be doing. But yes, it's easier to manage that way, and it's easier to focus specifically on a specific area and accelerate engagement in those areas. Just an example with the kind of channels. So this is not for the whole CERN social media, CERN channels. This is just from one department, which is the knowledge transfer department where I work. And just to give a broad view of what kind of channels we consider when trying to do a basic article communication. So it goes on the knowledge transfer channel. Then there are the KD channels like the newsletter, promotion, print promotion through brochures or other marketing material. Now, marketing material could be stickers or nice T-shirts, or it could be holding full-fledged events dedicated to talking about that technology or impact. And then there are, to the left, you will see the main CERN channels, which is home.cern, which is the main CERN website. Below that, you see CERN Bulletin. Now, CERN Bulletin is something which is an internal newsletter for all CERN members. And there, of course, you get an ability to fine-tune your story, fine-tune your communication, but also reach out to more focused people for opportunities. Then the social media, which is, of course, worldwide, and there it becomes a bit trickier to streamline the message, because on social media, while your following already creates a type of audience that follows you, when you're speaking on social media, you're essentially speaking to everyone. And you have to be aware of keeping the messages a bit more neutral, let's say. And then press action. So of course, there is the whole press team which has a focused dedication to engaging with journalists from all across the world, with different countries. And then the CERN events, which are not just group-wise events, but events that are held at the whole organization level. This is just to give a frame, just to give an idea of how the individual sections are then further divided into subsections for focused things. So I will just take an example of the first one, maybe the media and digital communications, how it has a press office, a dedicated press office to deal with press. Then there's the digital communications and social media, then a digital editor and a web team. So the digital editor and the web team kind of go hand in hand, where the web team is web development support and the digital editor is responsible for curating the content that then goes on this web. Similarly, the editorial content production has a writing team and a completely dedicated audiovisual team that has a great studio, which I'm glad to have, because whenever I need any videos or nice interviews, I can pester them for collaborating with us and then designing something. And similarly, there are community engagement, which is with internal communications, as I mentioned, but also taking it a step further for local communications. CERN is set at the border of two countries, Switzerland and France. So, of course, there is a huge community that's surrounding the actual physical offices, besides the obviously global spread of CERN. And exhibitions, of course, the exhibition has development and audience research. Then there is the teachers and students program, student programs, which again has a dedicated team for each program that it does. And the visitor and event operations, as the name suggests, engages more with the visits and the workshops that CERN hosts. Now it does a lot. So some of the examples are the permanent exhibition at CERN, which is the microcosm exhibition. And it's usually, so now it was having visitors again after a long shutdown over the CERN during the COVID pandemic. And now with high restrictions and high safety regulations, it is starting to open up. It's a permanent exhibition. A big project that is happening right now, the construction for which is happening right now at CERN, is the Science Gateway project. Now, why I thought it...
Priyanka,
okay. Hi.
Sorry to disturb you, but can you just wrap up?
Yes, okay, sorry. I'll just quickly wrap up. I think this is one of my last slides. And
thank you.
Yes, just sorry. So the Science Gateway project is a huge project for engagement with the public. And it goes towards showing how CERN is dedicated to it. And maybe I'll skip these. This was just to say social media being another form of engagement. And this was to just kind of integrate one of the answers to the questions that was there in the chat of feedback and analysis. I can talk about this later during the discussion as well, but we do focus a lot on feedback, and that could be through social media analytics, the website analytics, but also it could be through action conversions. How many callbacks we've received, how many appreciations we've received, have we created any secondary impact? Like some communication we've done, someone else has seen it, and maybe a startup has come out of it. Someone contacted CERN for its technology and created an impactful startup. So stuff like that. And with that, I will close my talk. It was the same thing about audience and doing a bit of evaluation and monitoring. But I have said my piece, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Priyanka. And thank you for touching upon how important evaluation and monitoring is and the feedback process, and also sharing some very practical frameworks of how you communicate at CERN, because I think that will be absolutely useful for our audience today. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to bring the perspective of a university here by inviting Yukti Arora, who works as the Senior Manager, Academic Communications at the Research and Development Office of Ashoka University. Her work involves liaising between the research office, the business office, and the outreach office to promote teaching and research across all disciplines at Ashoka, develop communication strategies and concept notes to build new partnerships and raise funds.
So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you to Banya for the kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here at the SciComm Huddle. We have always been discussing about doing this discussion meeting where we have all the science communicators and public engagement practitioners doing this discussion. And here we are today. So thank you so much, Fast India Science Fest, for organizing this. And I would also like to thank all the three speakers. I'm at a stage where I will not say that you have set the stage, but you have said more or less what I wanted to cover, but I'll try to cover most of the mutually excluded content that I wanted to touch upon. So I'll quickly give a brief about Ashoka University and then we'll take it forward from there. So Ashoka is located in the Sonipat district of Haryana. It's at a very convenient distance from the national capital, an hour and a half drive away from the Delhi International Airport. And there are regular shuttle services that are operational between the campus and the Delhi metro station. Ashoka has built a world-class infrastructure and really cutting-edge lab facilities that opens up endless options for exploration. I would actually like to highlight one thing here that I've spent a lot of my time in research institutions, and I would focus on the fact that a lot of people, most of the people I would say, are hired there to do similar sort of tasks that revolve around doing research. But in a university ecosystem, the system offers, or I would say it creates opportunities for students based on their interests, based on their needs, and it opens up the possibilities to bring in people from different expertise, different interests onto the same platform and do the task in a much more focused manner. So Ashoka is actually India's first university that offers liberal arts and sciences program. The first undergrad program was launched in 2014, and the sciences program came into the picture in 2017. So Ashoka is providing 2,600 plus students drawn from over 269 different Indian cities and 25 other countries, and interdisciplinary education with the help of globally, internationally renowned faculty. At Ashoka, we are not only trying to strengthen the interdisciplinary collaboration between physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, etc., but also we are trying to enable the crosstalks between the natural and social sciences, simply because that is perceived as a crucial collaboration to solve real-world challenges. So we have a lot of research centers that house different like researchers from across disciplines to carry out very targeted research to solve real world challenges. One of such departments is the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability, where researchers from across 9 different departments, including history, physics, environmental sciences, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, all of them have come together to not only raise awareness but also do research and advocacy on issues of climate change and sustainability. So at Ashoka, we really have a wide range of stakeholders that needs to be kept engaged, starting from leadership that comprises of the founders, board of management, governing body, and the core leadership team that constitutes of the head of the departments and the directors of different schools and departments. So we have mostly the leadership team that interacts with the potential funders. So Ashoka is a not-for-profit university that runs on collective philanthropy. So the leadership's job here is to ensure that the funders really understand and they appreciate the impact of research going on at Ashoka, so that they provide us with more money to buy equipments, to buy consumables, and also to invest more in the infrastructural development. On the other hand, we have the researcher and the faculty members who are regularly engaging with the students as well as with the academic and non-academic staff at Ashoka to take care of the pedagogy as well as the research. When I talk about students, we have a range of students here, starting from undergrad students, postgraduate students, PhD students. We have Young India Fellowship fellows, interns, postdoctoral fellows. So it's not really an easy task to keep such a diverse set of people engaged at the same time by a single unit. So I'll quickly share the structure and shed some light on how we really take things forward at the university. So we have a central research and development office, which has got 4 different verticals. We have the grants management vertical that takes care of the pre and post award management. Then we have the research infrastructure management wing that takes care of developing as well as setting up the laboratories for individual researchers. Then we have the scholar management wing that takes care of the recruitment of the staff and students across all departments. And lastly, we have the academic communications wing, which I lead. And this wing not only takes care of bridging the gap between science and society, but like how Banya mentioned, we also take care of liaising between the business office and the outreach office. So let's quickly see what exactly we do when I say that I have to bridge the gap between the research office and business office. I have to develop content to facilitate the fundraising process. Here, my target audience includes high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals. These are the potential donors. Then we, of course, have the existing pool of funders, founders, board of management, business team, mostly constituting of people from business administrative background. So all of that, I have to develop collateral slide deck to make sure that that my target audience really understand and appreciate the kind of work going on at Ashoka, and at this stage, metaphors, analogies, narratives, all of that really come in handy. On the other hand, when I have to work with the outreach office, the primary goal is to expand the reach of Ashoka research. Here, my target audience includes school fraternity, undergrad students, their parents, potential PhD applicants, and I need to develop content like which is more attractive, like videos, brochures, flyers. One thing that we need to ensure here is that we need to strike the right balance. We are neither oversimplifying the research, neither are we undersimplifying the research. So we need to maintain that balance so that people really appreciate the kind of work going on in the university. And like we discussed during our first session, I would like to actually touch upon one thing here, that yes, this part of work involves some sort of communication to be used as a marketing tool, but then that's just a part of it. A lot of work goes on in facilitating the intra-communication at Ashoka that will eventually facilitate interdisciplinary collaboration. So a lot of my work with the Research and Development Office involves developing communication and impact strategy for research at Ashoka, leading various research communication initiatives such as research highlights, interviewing the researchers at Ashoka, developing concept notes to build new partnerships, maybe with the industries. Then a lot of my time goes into developing website content, designing annual reports, flyers, fact sheets, brochures, videos, and so on and so forth. So I'll actually try to shed some light on some of the specific initiatives that are running at Ashoka, and we'll try not to spend a lot of time on some of the initiatives that have already been discussed in the last three talks. So we released the Ashoka Compendium, which is an annual affair, and this is released right at the start of the year, which is different from the annual report. So annual report is a much more comprehensive sort of a document. However, if one wants to really see what exactly has happened at Ashoka in last 1 year, and they need to simply flip through a couple of pages, and they'll get to know what are the what was the novel research that has come out of the Ashoka University, or what were the novel equipments procured to do the research, new partnerships built maybe with the industry or with the policy experts for evidence-based policy interventions. All of that is included in a much more crisp manner in the compendium. On the other hand, I would also like to talk about this initiative, which is Beyond the Classroom. So this is an interactive virtual lecture series where we conduct these global conversations with the renowned academics and intellectuals. This is free, open to all, archived on the Ashoka X webpage. Here is the web address where you can visit and look at what is the quality of content that we have been producing. So the lecture series was ideally started during the pandemic, and the idea was to really take the Ashoka mode of pedagogy outside Ashoka to the wider audience. And we have also been trying to produce a lot of content in the regional language to ensure better audience engagement. On the other hand, we have Ashoka Research Quest. This is a campaign that we started some time back, wherein we tried to interview the faculty members. This is more of a conversational interview where we have requested the faculty to explain their research, showcase their lab, and not only get into the details of the research projects, but give a bird's eye view of how their research is going to impact the society in the long run, even if it's a fundamental research. So the idea is to showcase the in-depth research that Ashoka University offers. Another public engagement initiative that I would like to talk about is Scientifically Speaking. This is something similar to Chai and Wai happening in the West at TIFR Bombay, or Copy with Curiosity happening at Bangalore, which Professor Gopakumar talked about. So I will not spend a lot of time here, but the idea is similar. We are trying to help students both from undergraduation as well as from school appreciate the importance of asking question, which is a critical aspect of doing science. So the series was launched in 2020. We have so far conducted 3 seasons. The 4th one is will be out soon. So the idea is to cater to a wide range of audience. In the North, we are again cognizant of having diversity in topics as well as in the speakers. And the session is followed. This is a 20-minute talk followed by a longish Q&A session, which is always interactive. So we are happy to cater to the questions. Even if we have a flooding of questions happening towards the end, we address those questions offline. All the sessions are archived, available on Ashoka YouTube channel. So the series has been really helping decode the most pressing scientific questions of our time in simple and introductory format. We have also been organizing webinars on pressing issues. Like this is one of the latest webinar that we organized last week on Omicron, which is the latest variant of concern. And I would like to highlight one thing here, that it's with the help of the media and the PR team at Ashoka that we could reach out to the larger audience. We really get support, technical support from their team in terms of multimedia, in terms of reaching out to the mainstream media. We could reach out to really larger audience. I would like to end with this last initiative. This is a very subject-specific initiative organized by Trivedi School of Biosciences. So the idea is to call upon the life sciences researchers from across the globe. It actually brings renowned, eminent scientists, mostly from life sciences, to the university. Previously, it was held offline, but currently it is being organized virtually. So the idea is to encourage the next generation of researchers and the community-wide community with diverse perspectives. So the platform facilitates, again, two-way dialogues between an eminent scientist and also the PhD students, not only from Ashoka, but we always see registrations and engagement from PhD students from different institutions in the country. So participation is primarily from the life sciences ecosystem, basis the topic of discussion, but it's always a two-way discussion. On that note, I would like to wrap up with this last slide that talks about the way forward. So most of the research communication work is very new, because it's just a couple of months back that I joined Ashoka. We need to streamline and strengthen this initiative. We certainly look forward to ensure greater inclusivity and diversity. And we being a liberal arts and sciences university, we have students from different disciplines under one roof. So the idea is to do something at an interface of performing arts, sciences, and really come up with more creative formats of research, communication, and public engagement, like theater, folk art, comedy. It was really great to be here, because I have a lot to learn and a lot to take back after today's session. So we really have a long way ahead. So look forward to more sessions tomorrow. On that note, I would like to thank you for being patient and listening to what I was trying to tell. And I would actually like to end on this note, that good research communication is when you help your audience engage in critical evaluation of the subject. So this was my take home from today's session. So thank you so much for being patient and listening to me.
Thank you, Yukti. Wonderful presentation, and thank you for sharing that very useful piece of advice with our audience today. I thank the fabulous speakers who have been very kind enough to interact with me today.